over to John, who has been organising these spirituality and awakening events, happenings.
With friends like Ruth here and others. So yes, a big welcome to you all. Thank you for coming. So we hold these spirituality and awakening events 2-3 times a year. And this evening is very special because the subject is very special. But also because we have two wonderful people to share with us this evening. We have Helena Kettleborough and her partner Phil Barton here. And the theme is one that's certainly very dear to my heart. I know that these two lovely people are very passionate about the theme of the earth and its species. Helena is, what shall I say, an expert in the work of Thomas Berry, the eco-theologian who has taught and written so well on these sorts of subjects. So it is a great privilege to have Helena come and speak to us with Phil also, so I'm really looking forward to it. Now, the evening's going to be approximately 2 hours. There will be a short break sometime in the middle. We're not going to be sitting in our seats the whole time, actually. So there will be a bit of movement of some sort. We will see exactly what. So let's see, what else have we got? There's an excellent bookstore just through the doors there, so do take a look at the books. There's some really very, very good books on this sort of theme. So let me see, have I forgotten anything? I think we'll hand over to Helena. Let's just give her a little welcome, shall we?
Thank you. I think we're just going to start with just a moment with the lights low, just for a moment, before I say anything to you. And I want you just to look, that is Saturn, the planet Saturn, and we're all in a spacecraft. So you imagine we're in a spacecraft, and we're all looking that way in our spacecraft. And this is a real test of our eyesight, but actually our planet, our home, which is what we want to share with you tonight, is up there. And I think actually you can see the pale blue dot just there. My hand is shaking a bit, but can you see it? And that is so extraordinary. So that you can't see it. Well, if any of you did want to get up, it's actually worth seeing it. I feel quite emotional when I see us so tiny. So if you want to, just before I start, if you come to here, you can see the pale blue dot, which is our planet. So it is worth, just, can you see it just up there? Can you see that? You can. Yeah. Can you see the pale blue dot? It is worth seeing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it is wow, isn't it? That is a wow when you see it. So if you haven't seen it.
It's a wow.
Yeah. 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 So that's really the context of tonight, is that wow. And just exploring it a bit together. So the term pale blue dot was actually created by a cosmologist called Carl Sagan. And he's a very wonderful writer, and I recommend for any of you to read him. You can get a DVD, you can get a book. He's got two sorts of books, a big picture book and a smaller one. So any of you like, if you like those words, he's very poetic. So what we're going to do this evening is sort of 6 waymarks, so I hope you'll really enjoy it. I'm really, really grateful to be here. Phil and I are both sort of bowled over by the church here and the space and the work you're trying to do. So what we wanted to do, I'm going to say a little bit about establishing base camp. It's kind of a journey is my theme tonight. And then we're going to look at Gaia's graveyards. I'm going to start by telling you a story, and then we're actually going to work together in 2 groups. You won't be asked to do anything that isn't nice, but we will be working together, a little bit of silence, a little bit of thinking together, and we'll be using the installations to inspire us, yeah? We're going to have a brief comfort break then, have a look at the books, just a little comfort stretch, and then I'm going to go on to tell you a little bit about Thomas Berry and Brian Swim and some of the key thinkers that have really, really inspired me. And basically the key word on that is hope. So we are going to go into some of the dark places of what we're doing to the planet, but actually that is where we're staying, is with hope. But we have to recognise, to start off with, what we're doing. And then I'm going to say, depending on the time, we'll do an exercise on actually dreaming the dream of the earth, so really hopeful, and then we'll look at some next steps. Now, Ruth is going to come up and just tell us, because one really, really important next step is that this church is going to have a whole month on exploring earth and spirituality. So I'd like to invite Ruth to tell us about that.
Thanks very much, Helena. Yeah, it's simply our theme for the next 4 Sunday mornings is going to be earth spirituality, all different aspects of it. In fact, we kind of started last week with Helen's lovely service of fallen leaves, tying our time of remembering into the seasons. And we're going to be, especially this coming Sunday, the 1st is going to be quite an interactive service, very few words, but a lot of things, or ways in which you can use your senses and your imagination to interact with the earth in all different ways. We're going to have a brief look at some of the things, the following Sunday, the things that have been done and said by the various churches, particularly looking at the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and also Pope Francis and some of what he said as well. And then the next one is going to be John talking about something he hasn't completely decided on yet, but I'm sure will be wonderful. Which he'll invent. And then the last one is going to be, thanks to Jonathan Flatworthy, is going to be a dialogue between Stephen Shakespeare and Angharad. No, Angharad, that's not a photo. But anyway, Angharad, who is a pagan druid. She is a druid. I couldn't remember whether she was actually a druid or not. But they are going to be dialoguing about reverence for the earth and what are the different approaches from these 2 different spiritual perspectives, and what do we have in common, what do we share, how do we differ, well, how does it deepen our spirituality. So 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning, everybody is very keenly invited to come to any of those that you can make and just participate. And I can also mention Forest Church. Look out for that. Look at our website. I think the next one is the 24th of November. We're celebrating the dark of the moon, and this is something that Helen and I are involved in, and we have these rituals which are very Celtic, very seasonal, and also with a lot of influences from pagan spirituality, so always out of doors as well. So do come and participate if you're able. Have a word with me in the break before I disappear, and also with Helen, and keep an eye on the website. And they also always have food associated with it. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to say that one of the things I'll be doing after this is also sharing and passing on the fact that you're going to do this, because it's trying to build the networks between us. So I just wanted to sort of start a bit with Base Camp, a bit about who I am, because I guess tonight what I'm offering you, and also with Phil, my partner, is trying to live some of this stuff, and how do you live it? I think sometimes people come and talk to you and you think, oh God, I've got to do something else, but I'm trying to share with you kind of how I lived it, and I thought it's really quite useful to think about the ways I've worked with these ideas. So that's a picture of me with lots of bags of rubbish. So very regularly, about once a quarter, we do a litter pick in our neighbourhood, and we've done that since 2009. and we're very proud of it, and we're proud of what we pick up. But that's partly who I am. But the other bit of that word is a scholar. So I'm very proud that last year I was awarded my PhD from Lancaster University, and I was awarded the PhD in these ideas, which I think is brilliant. I was at a management school, so I think it's really good to have these ideas in a management school. And just to share with you, something that I feel very strongly about is all the education I've received. And my own father was born before the 1944 Education Act came in, and he was never able really to get an education. He left school at 16, and he always wanted me to get a PhD. And he died, sadly, when I was 24, but I always held that in my heart, and last year I got one, so that's really important. And Warren says he knows Clive from St Agnes Church in Manchester. Some of you might know Clive, and Clive said to me that my father was there cheering me on, and it's a lovely idea of the people behind us in all this work. So just some other themes in my life. I want to talk to you a little bit about my career, because that's quite important, but I'll do that on the next slide. But a community activist, I've always tried to work about making the world a better place. So I was very active in the women's movement, and now at the moment we're very active in our local community. I've always followed a spiritual path in my life, so that weaves in and out, and sometimes you'll find in the environment people don't really talk about spirit, or they find that a bit difficult. The other thing is here, I don't know, I must confess, the history of Liverpool so well, but the history in Manchester is a very radical tradition of people working over decades to get a better life for everybody. So in Manchester we had the Peterloo Massacre in 1819, and that was people, ordinary working people, trying to get the vote. And we have the Pankhurst Centre, a very famous centre for women's liberation. So it's all there, and I think then family life. So I've tried to do this sort of work with the children, and Phil and I are very proud. We have a beautiful 14-month-old granddaughter, but when she was quite small I used to take her out, you know, this is sort of tradition, and I'd show her the trees, and I'd say, look, tree, and she got to know, associate trees with me. And you know, now when she sees me and we go out, she always looks at the trees, and I think it's something about that it's bringing all this into our own lives. And then the last point here is what Phil and I are doing is we're trying to take these ideas out. I just wanted to share this with you. For most of my life I've worked in the Northwest for social justice, so I was a women's officer, I was a worker with girls to try and get girls better provision in the youth service. I worked on regeneration in Rochdale, and in Stockport I worked for social inclusion. And this project here was something called Northwest Together We Can, which was across the whole of the Northwest. And we worked together for community empowerment. And the reason I'm sharing that with you tonight is it stays an inspiration to me, because this work now has mostly sadly gone, because as all of you know, local authorities are under a lot of pressure with their budgets. But this has inspired me, so I want to go out across the Northwest with these ideas and network people together, because this project was all about networking people together. So that's one of my goals for the future. So just very briefly, not to overemphasize it, I'm sure you all know, but where are we now? Where are we starting our journey tonight? Well, there's a lot of pressures on the world. So Homer Dixon is a Canadian scholar, and he says we have a lot of pressures. We've got things like there's not enough food, the population is rising, there are a lot of, it's very easy now for terrorists to make, very small groups of terrorists to make very bad bombs, which is something that's a real problem for society. They've got the limits to growth, that we are on a finite planet and we can't keep growing. And at the moment our main model of the economy is all about growth. 2014 was the hottest year on record, and one of our cuttings relates to that. And I think, I don't know what you feel about this year, but I feel it's pretty warm, and it's still quite hot now. And then that last one, half of the world's wild animals have been lost since 1970. So we are losing species at a very rapid rate. But one of the things out of many years of studying is that I have come to some conclusions based on studying a lot of very wise and people about pointers, and I just wanted to share some of them that we're all needed. So I suppose one of my messages is that every single one of us here tonight is really important in this work. I love this. Maslow, do you remember the Maslow's, the pyramid? Well, when Maslow, towards the end of his life, he wrote about management, actually. And one of the things he wrote about, it's a wonderful essay, you will find it, because he's such a famous writer, it is in the library. He wrote that in 1969, but I think it was republished in the late 1990s. And what he says, we can all be really selfish, because what we can do is the thing we're very best at. So if we're very good at sewing, that's what we can contribute, or if we're good at woodwork, that's what we can do. And I just love that. I say to everybody, being selfish actually can be really good for the planet. Our best skills are what the planet needs. I see it as a journey of the inner and the outer, and obviously here in this church that's something you really believe in as well. But I hope tonight what we'll do that is a little bit of that journey. I also see it, there's no sort of definite answers. It's a journey of discovery or inquiry, and I like that because it means, you know, you can hear me tonight, but I'm not trying to say I'm right, but I'm trying to share something with you and maybe, hopefully, spark, you know, your own journey, your own inquiry, and that's why we've got the books. And then this last point, I really like that. I was talking actually at Lancaster University earlier in the year, and somebody, Simon Grant, he works at the he lives in Lancaster Co-housing, which some of you might have come across. It's a community of people living together. And he was saying, it's this idea that the ideas that I'm sharing with you tonight are kind of like a seed, and you already have lots of seeds. And what we're trying to do together is kind of grow, I think, an oak forest, because I'm very fond of oak trees, but trying to grow together a forest so that all our contributions are really important. And I think that's really an important thing. So, because I don't know about you all, but there's so many different ideas out there. And if we can see them as all together, we can take them forward. So what I'd like to go on to now is to tell you a little bit about Gaia's graveyards and how we came to make them. So this is something, when I said to you earlier that really my journey has been a journey of our family, this is a journey of our family in terms of graveyards. So what happened was, I'll just go back, I'll just show you this. What happened was that in the millennium, well, before the millennium, our eldest daughter was very into the band Take That. Any of you remember Take That? Any of you go and see it with your children? Anyway, she was very into that band. And she used to have cuttings. She cut all sorts of cuttings and plastered her bedroom wall with those cuttings. And then the night they split up, when Phil came home, he found all the cuttings were off the walls. And they were all packed away. And in fact, they're still in our attic, because actually, although Mary's never had them out since, she still doesn't want to throw them away. But that was an example of cuttings. And in the millennium, with the two younger children, I started to do a scrapbook. And what happened was that I asked the children to collect anything they wanted to celebrate the millennium, and they decided to collect stuff about animals. And what we noticed when we were cutting stuff out, they got my mother involved, they got their aunts involved, that the animals were in trouble. That's what we noticed, that somewhere in those cuttings it was saying in the year 2000 the animals were in trouble. And we came to the end of the millennium and that year, and the children stopped collecting cuttings, but I kept going. Because I kept thinking, oh, that's very interesting, or what's happening to the Sphinx macaw, or what's happening to the frogs. And one evening, about 2005, that's quite a lot of years later, I was sitting in a very nice pub in Manchester. I recommend it. It's called the Sandbar. And Phil and I were having a pint, and I was telling him, oh God, I took a cutting out today, and it said that the frogs are seriously threatened. And Phil said, I don't know why you kept keeping collecting those cuttings. They're so depressing. And then he said to me, I know what they are. He said, they're your graveyards. And that was the word that stayed with me, because we all, whatever our culture, we all experience death. And so really what I began to see, those cuttings were my way of honouring those species. I'm not a scientist, so I can't prove to you that the species are in trouble, but I could notice year on year that they were in trouble. And so what happened was I kept collecting them. And in fact, I decided that they weren't really my graveyards, they were Gaia's, the planet's graveyards, because they really felt from the cuttings that it was the whole world that was involved. And when I started my PhD at Lancaster University, I had a very lovely supervisor called Professor Judy Marshall, and we decided we'd put these cuttings into the PhD. And I said to her, but Judy, I can't put them in the PhD. I've got boxes of them, because by this time, you know, 10 years later, there were boxes of cuttings in our house. And I said, Judy, I can't, they all need to be in the PhD. How can I put them in, you know, like boxes of cuttings? So what Judy said to me was, you'll have to choose just 6. And that was a real struggle for me, just to choose just 6. But actually, I did eventually choose, I think, about 12 cuttings for the PhD. And those cuttings have stayed with me. And when you look at the cuttings on that timeline, they have a real resonance for me, because I've collected they've been with me so long, yeah? But what happened was, if you go back to this, so the cuttings are a story of listening to the earth. They're a family story, because remember, they started from the children. They're a story of bearing witness. One of the thinkers that I really like is somebody called Gregory Bateson. Now, he's very hard to read, so I'm not going to pretend, but his daughter, Nora Bateson, has made a DVD, and in your spirituality or another kind, you might watch the DVD. It's only about an hour, but he is a very great thinker, and he felt that our problem was we think in straight lines and the earth doesn't think in straight lines. And he thought there was a lot of things wrong with our thinking. He said, you know, if we think that we can win against the environment, we're absolutely bonkers, because we're part of the environment, yeah? But he felt that maybe art and artists can help be a bridge between what we're doing and thinking differently. And this is where my partner Phil comes in, because this, fast forward a bit, I got the PhD, I've still got boxes of cuttings in our house, they're still everywhere. And talking to Phil, he said, maybe we can do something with them. So for this part of the story, I'm going to hand over to Phil.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for inviting us here. So as Helena says, our house is full of boxes and cuttings. And we've talked about taking them out somehow and allowing them to speak, because in a sense, being in boxes in our house is not going to take them very far. And earlier this year, we had a double opportunity. Firstly, I gave up my job, which was quite a demanding job, a difficult job, and had not really given me any space. And then secondly, a friend, a former colleague of mine, set up an art gallery in Cornwall and invited us to exhibit in his first show. And the two installations that are in the church at the moment, which we'll have a look at in a moment, we created for that show. And they're here now. They were in Cornwall in June and July. They're here now. They're going to a conference at Manchester Metropolitan University on alternatives to GDP immediately after they've been here. And we're working on our next project, which we call, perhaps come back in a future date and tell you all about, maybe even involve you. But I just wanted to say, what I would propose is that we split into two groups, maybe just straight down the middle, that might make sense. And we'll spend a few minutes, one group with this installation, the other with the other one, and then we'll swap over, so you'll both have the opportunity to look at both of them. But just very briefly before we do so, the installation you can see here is actually in the form of a timeline, and the cod you can see at the top on the left-hand side was cut out in 2000. And the story about the 6th great extinction, which is going on at the moment, at the bottom right hand, was cut out earlier this year. And there was one of those cuttings from each year for the 15 years since the millennium. And each of them focuses on either a species or a group of species or a habitat. So that's the context of that piece. And we've arranged them in a downward graph, if you like, to sort of emphasise the fact that the number of species. Nobody knows how many species there are in the world. Nobody knows how many we've lost. But everybody is agreed that the rate of extinction is the highest that it's been over the last 100 years or so, since the last great extinction 63 million years ago, I think, when a large meteorite hit the Gulf of Mexico and the dinosaurs went and so on. And it's the first extinction which is human. One of the species on the Earth has been causing that extinction. The other one, which we're going to look at, is rather different. We collected at least one newspaper from every day in February this year. Why February? Because in January we discovered we were going to have the opportunity to do this. But we collected at least one newspaper from wherever we were in February, and we cut out of them every cutting which was related to the Earth and the species that live on the Earth. And unlike the rest of the work, we actually kept the papers which we had cut them out of. And what you'll see when you have the opportunity to look at that installation is all of the human-centred cuttings, if you like, paper, which is about wars and politics and fashion and sport, and all the other things that we spend a lot of our time, is in a cabinet which I reclaimed from backyard in one of the local second-hand dealers. And we cut the cuttings which are about the other than human, about species, about habitats and so on, are suspended above it. And so what we would like to do is run two exercises, one focused on the timeline and one focused on February last year. And what I'd like to suggest, as I say, if you guys stay here, and we will go up to the top of the church, and then we'll swap over. Helena will stay here, and I'll stay there.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Yes. And if you haven't got anything to write,
Well, there's lots of pens.
lots and lots of it would be helpful if you were able to.
Because one of the things we thought we could leave the church is the post-its that you do. So they're not wasted, because actually they're fascinating for other people to look at, and other exercises. So it's a way of working tonight and then leaving it for other people. What we thought we'd like you to do, and I hope you enjoy this, and at the end of it, by the way, I'm going to ask you all to write on a post-it feedback, but we thought, I could talk to you for the 2 hours that you've given, and I'm not sure that makes a lot of difference. And what we really want you to do, in a sense, is kind of feel this in your heart. I know when my kids get sick, I kind of go into overdrive, and I think what we're trying to share here is, can we feel that same passion for the other species? So what we'd like you to do is just have a look to start off with. I'll tell you what we're doing, so there's no surprises in it, because we hope you'll find it fine. We want you to look and choose a cutting, and then we want you to, in silence, and we are in a church, to reflect on the headline and the picture, yeah? And then, when you've done a little bit of that, to write on a post-it anonymously what it makes you feel. And what we'll do then is collect those feelings that you've written on those post-it notes, yeah? And then what we'd like to do then is, just in a group, just share together for a few minutes, what did it make you feel, yeah? And the very final bit, because we are trying to mix the kind of despair and the hope, yeah, is anything on a post-it note, and I'm going to suggest we write it on one of those cards actually, a response you'll take away with you from tonight, from doing this work with Gaia. So it is sad, but we're entering into the sadness for a purpose, to kind of go with these animals and these species, and then to think about how we can work together. And I think what's so wonderful for me doing this, I've done this workshop, is that you're actually doing something. You're not just stopping tonight, but St Bride's is taking this on, and I think that's so good. So do you want to choose together? Do you want to choose a cutting a year? Obviously you can't touch it or take it with you, but just have a look at the headlines.
choosing it and then recording our...
Yeah, and just, in silence for 2 minutes. I'll I'll give you a few minutes to choose one, yeah. I'd just like to thank you all for participating in that, and because I know actually, you know, it's in the evening and you get tired, but actually it does make a big difference if we all work together, so thank you very much. So what I want to do now, I'm looking at the time, and I've had a request that I might just say a little bit about Green Spirit and maybe the bookstore. So I want to keep going, and maybe there'll be another exercise we might do more fully, but what I'm hoping is you've got a whole month, and maybe it's possible to do some of that later when you're together. So what I want to talk to you, we didn't have this because we've run out of time. We were going to have a comfort stop, but that's fine. But I've just checked with John, and at 8 o'clock when we finish, if any of you'd like to buy any books, you'll be able to, so that's when you'll be able to do that. So what I want to do now, and remember I started off by saying it's a journey of discovery and inquiry, so we're journeying together, but I want to say, especially in our group, looking at the timeline, you know, people express the fact that they felt sad, or the overwhelming nature of what we're doing to the planet. What do we do about it? And the fact that I'm sure most of you in the room have all been working in your own way, working on the environment or social justice over years, so it's not that people aren't doing things. And what I want to do is explore the New Universe story and the dream of the Earth, and maybe what you could do is take those two themes with you into the next month. That's what I would suggest as part of your work, kind of exploring these themes. And a journey to the power of 10, I just want to do this just for a few minutes with you. I just want you, if you'd be very willing, to just relax in your chair and maybe hold on to the side of your chair, and put your feet on the ground, nice and firm on the ground, because you're going on a journey and you might get a bit dizzy. So I just want you to just center yourself. Here are some brides, here we are all together, and I just want you to imagine, and you can do this with your eyes closed, your eyes open, it's fine. Imagine the leap from St. Bride's all the way to the International Space Station. So you're right above the planet and you can see down the beautiful blue curve of the Earth. And then I want you to make another leap, which is the furthest we've ever been as human beings, from this beautiful, just above the planet, you're in low Earth orbit actually, then you go out of the sphere of the planet and you get to the moon. And the thing about the leap to the moon is you're then sort of in the cosmos, because you're no longer in the circumference of the planet Earth, so you're out there. And then I'd like you to take a leap all the way from there to the sun herself, which is our star, and I'd like you to imagine, so you've been on the planet Earth, remember the planet Earth is going round, then you've leaped to the sun, and the sun herself is going through the Milky Way galaxy. So we're all travelling, not just going round and round in a circle, we're all travelling through the Milky Way galaxy. And I just want you to just visualise the 8 other planets, they're coming with us, and it's kind of a spiral, because the sun is going forward, and then these 8 planets are spiralling around each other, and they're all going forward, yeah? And then if you can imagine, your next leap is to the nearest star, which is 3.4 light years away. So that's a really, really long way, our nearest star. And then, if you can, make an even huger leap to the Milky Way galaxy herself, which is our home galaxy. And as a solar system, we travel round the Milky Way galaxy, going through different parts of the galaxy, around every 250 million years. So, you know, the sun with all her planets, she's travelling around the Milky Way galaxy. And then I'd like you to imagine the Andromeda galaxy, which is a pinwheel galaxy and is a big sister galaxy to our own. And then the final stop I'd like you to take on this journey is somewhere called Laniakea, which has just been found and named Laniakea. Laniakea is immeasurable heaven. The scientists have named it that, and Laniakea is the supercluster of galaxies that we belong to. So the mystics have always known that we live in immeasurable heaven, and the scientists now agree, and we live in Laniakea. And I'd just like you to stay there for a moment on that journey and just think what an incredible journey it is, but also even more incredible that it's only a journey we've known in the last 400 years, really. We've never known that journey. It's so wonderful. So I'd just like you to come back to the room now, and in a sense that journey is the basis of what I'm sharing with you tonight, the New Universe story. And I hope you got some sense of the awe and wonder of where we live in the planet, in our cosmos. And by the way, you can do it the other way, down to the power of the 10 to the very, very smallest. I'm not as fond of that journey, so I don't tell it. But some of you might be very, very interested in the very small, and you can go the other way. So one of the things to say is that we could describe ourselves as without a story as a society. And so cosmologist Brian Swimme says that we have a story, actually, and it's something like we live, we go to work, we shop and we die. Something like that. Something like a story that's about consumerism, really. And consumerism isn't good for the planet, and it isn't good for us and our spirit. And Thomas Berry, who all his life actually was a Catholic priest and lived in America, he studied Eastern and religions, and he studied his own Christian religion, and he knew Teilhard de Chardin very well. So he had this immense intellectual tradition behind him. And after many years of studying both Teilhard de Chardin and the Eastern religions and his own religion, he was a Catholic, he decided that we needed a new story. A new story. And the story he thought we have is this story of the universe, which actually belongs to all of us and every culture. And I kind of offer it to you as a reflection. I mean, my journey in encountering Thomas Berry is over many years, and the first one was getting the book, The Great Work, in 1999, and remember sitting by the fire on Christmas Day. It was a Christmas present for my children, and they'd written it, "I love you, Mummy," in the front. And the other thing was coming across these ideas, these books, some of which are out there. So the books that I came across were from something called the Green Spirit Bookstall, which was run by somebody called Alan Shepard, and he thought that these ideas are out there, but they're not easy to find. So anything I'm telling you tonight is out there on the internet, but it's not easy because there's so much stuff out there. And also, one of the other things is we're all really busy, and we all have a lot to do, so it's really hard sometimes to make the time for new ideas. And when I studied Thomas Berry, he started off with Brian Swimme. In 1978, he said we needed a new universe story, and he told basically that story, that journey that I'm taking you on, because that journey that I took you on is out into the depths of the universe. And as you know, one of the things the scientists discovered is how old the universe is, that it's 13.8 billion years old, and that it has grown and transformed over all these years. And he called that Thomas Berry called that the New Universe Story. And in 1992, he wrote a book with Brian Swimme. Brian Swimme's a cosmologist, and they called it the New Universe Story. And I think the difference between this story and maybe the science books, because remember all of you have either got family or children who read science books, is that they were trying to see it as a journey of the universe, as a living, sacred universe. That was the difference they added to it. And this book, The Heart of the Cosmos, I don't unfortunately have it on the bookstall, but I would really recommend it. And maybe if the church here, St. Bride's, was to buy some books as a church community. In The Heart of the Cosmos, Brian Swimme, as a cosmologist, tries to convey to us that we live in a very special place and a very special universe. Because one of the things people often say to me, they've heard that story, you know, the leaps we did. They say, oh, well, I've done it before, and we just live on a really lonely planet, and the far-flung echelons of the cosmos. We're not at all special. But actually, when you start to look at the story, what you find out is that actually life itself is incredibly special. And those points came out in some of our discussions today. It's very, very unusual. The stardust we're made of is very, very unusual. A lot of the cosmos is made out of dark matter. And in the creation of our planet, there have been a lot of what they call cosmic coincidences as to how life got here. So what they're trying to tell us in this story, what they're suggesting to us, is that our planet is very special, and that life is very special, and that we are very special, because as a human species, we are able to think and reflect. So that story I just told you is the most wonderful story, that a part of the universe has grown up and can understand the universe. So we are made out of the universe, we're made out of stardust, and we can now think back and reflect about the universe itself. So we're the self-reflecting bit of the universe. There's two geologists who work at Exeter University, and they did study under James Lovelock. And those of you who've come across James Lovelock, he sees the Earth as a whole, as an interconnected systemic whole. So they studied under James Lovelock, and what they did as geologists, they looked back over 4.5 billion years of Earth history. And what they found was, in those 4.5 billion years, is that there had been a number of crisis points in the Earth's history that we've got through. And they identified this point where we are now as another very crucial point. But what they were arguing in that book, as geologists, not as cosmologists, was that planets like ours with complex life, they think are very rare in the universe. They weren't arguing that life itself was rare, but they were arguing that complex life, of which all these species are a part and we are a part, is very rare. And they were arguing that because the evidence points to it being rare, we should really treasure it. And the book at the bottom, I'll come back to The Dream of the Earth, but the book at the bottom, Brian Thomas Swim and Mary Evelyn Tucker, is out there, and it's quite short. So some of you might like reading long books, some of you might not like reading at all. And some of you might say, well, I can just about manage a short book. But actually it is out there, and these ideas are in it. And the other thing I was suggesting to John, that you maybe as a church, I've got a DVD of the story of the journey of the universe by Mary Evelyn Tucker and Brian Swim. And it is quite an accessible DVD and quite enjoyable. So I would really recommend that. So what I want to do with you, and it is a journey of inquiry, so what I'm saying to you is that a number of people have been thinking about what's happening to the planet and trying to see it in a different way. And I think I wanted to just bring out a number of points for you. For Brian Swim, who's a cosmologist, he has a lovely interview. You can find it on the internet. It's under Enlightenment. If you just Google Brian Swim and Enlightenment, Enlightenment is the name of the journal. And the journalist was asking him, so what's so special about this universe we're in? What's special? And he says, you take hydrogen atoms, you leave them for a very, very, very long time, and you get giraffes and humans and snowdrops. And that really, in a sense, sums it up. We started as hydrogen atoms, and we've now got this glorious world. But the other point that for me is very, very important is that Brian Swim said that if a hydrogen atom, over a long, 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 long period of time, results in human beings who are spiritual, he argues that hydrogen atoms have had the potential to be spiritual, or there has been the potential for spirituality all the way back in the universe. So he doesn't see a divide between a universe, just a physical universe, and a sacred universe. He sees them both together, absolutely interlinked. And to me that is really important. So the work we've been doing today or tonight, I would see as spiritual work, and that how we had a question at the back from the lady, how are we going to tackle something that is so big? I think from the thinkers I've studied, it is a spiritual response. But I have put the second point is that I think obviously we have to share. For me, when I talk about spirituality, I have a very ecumenical definition of spirituality, and I have a lovely quote from a Benedictine prayer book, actually, where the author of the book is trying to translate the Benedictine rule into modern day circumstances. And he says that he thinks all of us have a relationship with spirit, but we all call it by different names, and that's what he works with in his book, and that's what I work with. So I think talking about spirit is really, really important, but for me, and I have to be really honest with you, it's a very ecumenical definition. And for Thomas Berry, and I think that is a contribution from Thomas Berry, the whole universe is sacred. So one of the things about all these species is that they're actually sacred, and that sacredness does not just reside with human beings. And then he sees it that you can go beyond that further than the species, and it's the planet and the cosmos. And I think those ideas have the potential to help us from where we are now, because in a sense it's a different way of seeing the world. And for those of you who are able to come tomorrow morning, and as long as there's more than 2 or 3 of us, I'd be very happy to work with you. The other part of my work is how do we share some of these ideas? How do we share what I'm sharing with you now out there wider, and particularly maybe sharing some of the ideas about reflection and spirit with people who maybe really don't relate to that. So one of the things tomorrow morning is that I'd like to look at these ideas, but talk about, can we find a new map? Can we use these ideas to create a map for ourselves, and can we create the map together? And I have some tools for the journey to suggest that we might use together. So that's what we might do tomorrow morning if any of you are interested. Now I just want to leave you with something that is really, really hopeful. So one of the reasons, although that all fills me with great sadness, I'm absolutely convinced we can do it. And being here today is part of my contribution to how we might start to puzzle this out. But each one of you is, I think, part of that contribution. And I'd like to give you an idea from Thomas Berry. What Thomas Berry said was that we really, over the past 400 years, we've got a bit lost. You know, we used to be part of the cosmos. Most cultures were part of the cosmos, but somehow in our society we got a bit lost, and so we reduced ourselves right down to just the humans. And I hope that that installation out there shared that a bit with you, that actually what's going on, all this is just not reflected. So Thomas Berry says we need to go back out there. We need to start with ourselves, because he felt that each individual was really important. So that's something I think is really good to say, that the individual is important. But then he said we need to relate to the planet, which is Gaia, the planet up there, and we need to relate to the cosmos. So we're really pulling ourselves out of just our own thinking. And because I've been a community development worker all my life, I've added another little step in what Thomas Berry said. I think we need to start with ourselves and then our community, whichever our community is, because we all relate to it, be it our streets or our family or our city or our region. Yeah? So we need to think about everything from ourselves to our community, to our planet, to our cosmos. And once you start using those ideas, you can then start to say, well, how do we do what we're doing, but we try to live that way, yeah? So how can we do that? So I'll give you a very simple example. I wanted to help I'm very active, I said, Phil and I, with our residents group, and just to try and share some of these ideas. And so a year or two ago, the Mars and Jupiter were really bright in the sky. You could see them really clearly. And I took to stopping my neighbours and just saying, have you seen Mars and Jupiter? And a lot of them, people didn't even know. People just don't look up. We live in inner city Manchester. You really can't see the stars very well. So, but it happened, you could see these stars. You know, I can normally see only about 6 to 12. It's really very, very cloudy. But, so I'd say to my neighbours, they're up there. And eventually people started looking up, you know,